Behold, hasne bo'er ba'esh, the bush was burning. The hasne einenu ukal, but the bush was not consumed. A miraculous event from last week's Torah portion in the biblical book of Exodus, where Moses encounters a shrub that is ablaze with fire, but is not burning up. A symbol which would come to be seen by our ancient sages as representing God's eternal, enduring presence with the people of Israel. Enduring, eternal, means forever. In, through, and after a fire. Generations after that sacred encounter, after the Exodus and the biblical conquest of the land of Israel, a great temple was constructed on a hill in Jerusalem, the holy city of Jerusalem. And the rabbis of old say it was built on the very spot that Abraham, our father, ascended to offer his beloved son Isaac to God as a sacrifice. And after worshiping there peacefully for quite some time, the year by our calendar became 586 before the Common Era. That's 2,611 years ago. I don't do a lot of math, but I can add and subtract. Moses' descendants, they smelt a sharp odor, the smell of something burning. This was not the aroma of animal sacrifices. No, it was the Babylonians sieging Jerusalem and setting fire to the very first synagogue that was ever constructed. There were no fire alarms in the ancient temple. There were no 911 calls to be made. Carried into exile by the waters of Babylon, our first ancestors, they laid down and they wept. And then, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, they vowed to return and to rebuild because hasne einenu ukal. The bush was not consumed. Fast forward another few centuries. It's 70 of this, the Common Era, 1,956 years ago. And Yochanan ben Zakkai, a respected Pharisee, is at odds with the militant zealots who control Jerusalem. So he feigns his own death and instructs his students to place him in a coffin filled with rotten food to stimulate the smell of a corpse. They smuggle him out of Jerusalem. Carrying this coffin through the city gates, the guards convinced he's dead. And once outside, he reveals himself to Vespasian, who was leading the Roman siege. Yochanan ben Zakkai addresses Vespasian as king, a bold and prophetic move, as shortly afterwards news arrives that Vespasian has been proclaimed emperor. Well, Vespasian is so impressed with Yochanan that he grants him one request. Yochanan asks for Yavne, a nearby town. Why? Because he knows that the Romans are about to set fire to the constructed temple. So, he scouts out a decent suburb. One with affordable housing and public transportation and decent property taxes. He doesn't have to worry about the school system because he's going to use vouchers to build his own private institution, the first yeshiva. And then, like us, here at Congregation Micah, he grows a little more savvy about security, and he develops a strategic plan. Instead of building and rebuilding one temple, he plants seeds everywhere. And the Jewish people begin to construct a bunch of them all over the world. And so again, out of the ashes of the Second Temple, Jewish life is reimagined, and it's reinvented, it's rebuilt, and it's strengthened. And at this point, you already know why. Because Hasnei Einenu Ukal, the bush was not to be consumed. Our first and second temples both went up in flames. Our sanctuaries have been the target of hate and destroyed by fire ever since. Often with the support of other religious leaders. In the 4th and 5th centuries, it was Christian mobs who set fire to us and to our temples. In the year 1108, following a Muslim victory at the Battle of Euclid, synagogues in Castile were burned in celebration. On Kristallnacht, in Nazi Germany and Austria, in 1938, over 267 synagogues were burned. I'm going to pronounce their names wrong. The Fasantresbach synagogue in Berlin, the Rosenstrasse and Glockensee synagogues in Cologne, the Herzog and Rudolfsee synagogue in Munich. And lest you think we're safe here, in the 1950s, especially throughout the civil rights area, a series of bombings targeting Jewish spaces here in the South took place. Temples in Miami, Atlanta, Birmingham, the JCC here in Nashville, firebombs. Hasnei Einenu Uchal, but our traditions have failed to be consumed. In the 1980s, in Bloomington, Indiana, where my son attends college, I'm sorry, go Hoosiers on Monday night. Uh-oh. The local Beth Shalom synagogue was damaged by arson. In Sacramento, California, coordinated firebomb attacks on Beth Shalom, B'nai Israel, Knesset Israel, Ahadat Israel of Riverdale set fire. Israel, Istanbul, Sweden, France, Australia, and we can count Mississippi. It's a much longer list than that. They don't get it. They can burn our synagogues to the ground, and they can render our sacred spaces unusable for a time. They can damage our ritual objects. They can destroy decades of communal memories. It's not even the first time that white supremacists bombed Beth Israel in Mississippi. Rabbi Perry Nussbaum was a visible black ally of a leader of the black community, friends with the black community, including Medgar Evans. And his moral courage made him and the community a target. And after the synagogue was set fire, then the building was rebuilt. Because, as I've said a number of times, Hasnei Einenu Uchal, that we will not be consumed by the fire or by the hate. Here we have Palestinians burning synagogues in 2005 after Israel's withdrawal from the Strip. You know, we've lived in places as a tiny minority for generations, carving out space for faith and for community and for civic engagement. And what is really most disturbing to me about these acts is their familiarity. And in my darkest fears, I believe there will be more. Some people look at the pictures and say, what do you expect in Gaza? The Palestinians, Netanyahu. Yeah, no one vandalizes Russian Orthodox churches in America because of Vladimir Putin. Does anyone boycott Chinese restaurants because of the Chinese persecution of the Uyghurs? No one should ever suggest that victims of violent bigotry are responsible for the hatred that are directed at them. We would never say that about any other group. Now, we can learn historically. 1967, Tripoli, Libya. Beth El Synagogue burned to the ground by a mob during an anti-Jewish protest right after the start of the Six-Day War. Why? Because we know anti-Semitism seems to be as eternal as our covenant with God. And sometimes it's oddly polite, and other times it's lethal. And it lies dormant like an autoimmune disease. And it seems to flare up when there's fear and there's desperation or there's social change and someone needs a scapegoat. So who stands with us? Who's going to speak out against it? Christian pastors? Muslim imams? A lot of us went to that Holocaust museum exhibit that Belmont hosted. Some were neighbors. Are local Jewish or local religious leaders other than Jewish ones from other traditions going to denounce what happens in Mississippi? Where a wall of black, dense smoke and waves of intense heat consumed a sacred structure like an inferno. As disturbing as all of this is, I think we would do well to remember that while that synagogue was fully ablaze, at least everything with a heartbeat was safe. And events like this, they cause us to emote. Rabbi Lori and I were pretty fired up this week, but we refused to be consumed by the hate. We try to embrace our feelings, allow ourselves to feel the fear and the anger and the sadness and the rage without being consumed by it. Over the course of the last few days, I began to recognize that the challenges of being a Jew in the world today provide us all a chance, like our ancestors, to grow. In some ways, to grow more vigilant in a dangerous world. In other ways, to grow closer to one another as a community, a people, stronger, like we always have. Singled out, yes, scapegoated perhaps often, but also to practice Judaism here at Micah with a sense of gratitude for the good things, however small they may be. So I invite you this Shabbos to think of some of the good things. Our history is replete with stories and acts of resilience, and I am certain that we too, as a Jewish people, can find strength not to be consumed by the fire. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.